Now and Then by the Beatles on this Sonic Obsession. The Beatles are back. They didn't really go anywhere though, did they? But they are back with a new single. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And no, I mean, I don't think the Beatles have gone anywhere really over the years. They keep coming back with remastered, remixed product and, go to the top of the charts. And I suspect this new single Now and Then will do the same thing.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. What do you think of it?
Well, as someone like yourself who experienced the Beatles in real time over this amazing 7-year period in the 1960s, I'm sure you could remember, like me, the times you knew a new single was going to be released, because they released a lot of singles separate from their albums and everything, and you would sit there and you would wait in anticipation to see what this amazing band was going to do next. And I honestly felt like that in the last few days.
Oh, me too, yeah.
Like waiting for this song to come out, almost like it really made me feel like I was 12 years old again and waiting for, Penny Lane to come out or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember hearing about singles coming out, but I remember when I would first hear them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it's the Beatles with a new song, like especially Revolution. Like Revolution and the flip side, Hey Jude, or Hey Jude on the flip side, Revolution. To me, that was just an amazing double-sided single. I mean, really. I mean, and bands just didn't do that often. Well, the Beatles did it, but nobody else has ever done it. Not like the Beatles did it.
Well, I expected, well, how could this be as good as those at that time? How could they sound the way they sounded? How could I be, looking in awe almost at what comes out when this tidbit of music that I heard as a sort of a muddy home demo of John Lennon singing in the Dakota, Now and Then, how could that possibly move me in that way? And it did.
Yeah, me too. I found it very emotional.
I got tears in my eyes just watching Peter Jackson's 12-minute documentary where they unveiled his clarified voice. They scraped the mud off of this thing, took the background stuff out, traffic noises from the street below the Dakota where it was recorded in 1978, I guess, the TV playing in the background, and the piano. And to hear that pure John Lennon vocal for 5-6 seconds from that documentary, I got tears in my eyes.
And then, of course, when you heard the single, you got the full vocal.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jackson and his staff have just done an incredible job.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the production, when they put the single together, Paul McCartney, Giles Martin, and everybody else involved in the production. I mean, they did an incredible job with that as well, because they pieced all of this stuff together. And when I say all of this stuff, it was the demo that Lennon did, and then it was some guitar work that George Harrison did. And I think they may have added some guitar work. I don't think it's all George Harrison. That's just a little cloudy from what I've read about it.
Well, the solo, like the slide guitar on this, is McCartney.
It is. I thought so. Yeah.
And he's doing it in a style that George would have done.
Right, because it was inspired by George. George Harrison.
Yeah, and the earlier Harrison stuff came from their attempt in 1995 to initially finish this song as part of the anthology series.
Yeah.
But because of the low quality of the Lennon demo, they just were not able to do it. But now Jackson was able to clean all of that up. I think they did a real disservice in calling it artificial intelligence. I think there are people out there, I was talking to somebody today, who thought, well, who wants to hear an artificial intelligence vocal of John Lennon? And that's not what they did. They used the technology. Yeah, to clean up all of that stuff, and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I mean Ringo's drums. I'm very happy to say they're at the forefront.
Yeah,
they're not buried like they have been in so many Beatles songs. Mm-hmm. I found with the remasters of Beatles material that have come out over the years, Ringo's finally
Yes, pushed to the front.
pushed to the front, and it shows just what an integral member of that band he was. So you've got a mix of McCartney's guitar and Harrison's guitar on this single.
Yes.
And of course, McCartney playing bass.
Bass.
And then the strings were added because
Yes.
McCartney mentions that in the documentary.
Right.
They added strings. And as he says, why not? I mean, the Beatles had strings on quite a few of their
And I
songs.
found it very kind of Eleanor Rigby-ish.
So did I, yeah.
And, you know, with the cellos and violas, you know. I just thought it was an amazing song, and better than I would have expected and was expecting. So it kind of lived up to the past Beatle history of being just in awe of what they've done.
Yeah, and I mean, Lennon's vocals are, it's that, I don't know, Lennon, his voice is
very distinctive.
Very distinctive, but he's being, I think I read somewhere, and it was a good point, John Lennon being apologetic. I'm assuming that he is singing to Yoko in the song, but he's also being very warm, and he's being very tender, and that was a side of Lennon that did come out, especially in his work, you know, that was done just shortly before he died, the material that he released, because he was working as John Lennon's solo artist. And I think people should remember that this was a John Lennon solo song to begin with. And then the rest of the Beatles, well, I should say, they all got involved years ago and couldn't do anything with it. And then, sadly, George Harrison passed away, so Ringo and McCartney kind of picked it up. I think they did a great job with it. I mean, I really love the song, and it's very emotional. And to hear Lennon again, I mean, it sounds like he just recorded it, really. It's so clear and plain, you know.
You read Jeff Emerick's book like I did, Here, There, Everywhere. Jeff Emerick, for those who may not know, he was the longtime engineer for the Beatles during, you know, from Revolver to Sgt. Pepper, the White Album, all of that. And he put out this incredible memoir, Here, There, Everywhere, that came out a number of years ago. He's now sadly passed on. But one of my takeaways from that book was how much Lennon hated his own voice.
I remember that, yeah.
He couldn't stand his own voice, which is ridiculous. I mean, he's got I mean, he does have a very distinctive voice. Nobody sounds like John Lennon except maybe his two sons.
That's true, yeah.
But he hated the sound of it, so he was always pushing the production crew at Abbey Road at EMI Studios to alter his vocals. You know, do something to it, you know, to make it sound otherworldly. And the thing that really moved me in hearing his voice was how wonderful a voice he had.
Yeah.
Like, he was completely out of his mind if he thought he does not have a good voice.
And especially when he was singing a song like Now and Then, like a softer song, more melodic than some of the rockier material that he sang with the Beatles. And it's so. I said plain, not plain as
it's clear.
It's clear. That's
you know, there's no huge amounts of vibrato and all of that stuff that, you know.
It's just his raw voice.
Serious singers supposedly have, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he's sitting at a piano at the
pure.
Dakota. It's pure. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it sounds that way. I mean, he had an incredible voice. But I hear John Lennon singing as John Lennon with the lyrics in this song and the way that he sang it, not as a Beatles song. I think it's kind of hard to describe, but I think, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but at the same time, it had those really beautiful chord changes that Lennon usually brought to a Beatles song.
Oh yeah.
Like it's John Lennon. It could have been a solo album, but with what Paul McCartney, Giles Martin, and Ringo Starr did, they made it a true Beatles song. You know, the thing I was happy to see, I was fully expecting Paul to insert himself more into the song that he actually did.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Like, I thought he would write a bridge or something like the bridge in A Day in the Life, you know, that changes the whole tenor of the song. But he didn't do any of that.
No, but Lennon asked him to work on that song too, right?
Yes.
You know, because he couldn't quite capture it.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I'm glad Paul was respectful to the reality that this was a John Lennon song.
Yeah, and I think that respect is shown. And I mean, they've done a respectful job, of course. And a lot of people are, saying, I've seen comments online, remastering, putting it out there, and basically they're implying that they're just doing it for the money.
Which is
I don't think so.
It's ridiculous. You think Paul McCartney needs more money? I don't.
I think Paul McCartney and Ringo are doing it because they still love the Beatles and they want to keep doing everything that they can to put out new Beatle material or to make the Beatles material relevant or whatever, as long as they live. Because let's face it, none of these guys have surpassed in their solo careers what they did as a group.
No.
None of them.
Right.
Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, or Ringo, of course. And it's when you get a Beatles song, you realize, my God, these guys were good.
Well, how special it is.
Yeah.
And I've been reading comments online from some people who, obviously there is criticism out there. There's a lot of praise and there's a lot of criticism. But people saying it's such a gloomy song and a glum song.
Oh, I don't think so.
Well,
listen to the lyrics.
Well, it is. There's a lot of minor chords and that, that gives it that sort of melancholy feel. But do you really want to hear John Lennon sing a song that he did in 1978, knowing that he was murdered 2 years later? Do you really want that to be enough?
Well,
yes, it's melancholy. That's why I had tears in my eyes listening to it.
I don't find it gloomy. I find it just very emotional, and it's Lennon bearing his soul.
There's a lot of melancholy. There's a lot of regret in those lyrics. I miss you, and what's he singing about? Is he singing about Yoko? Probably, more than likely.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that wants him to feel regret and remorse for the end of the Beatles.
Well, that's the other side of it too. Yeah. I'm like you. Those are the two. Who is he singing about?
Yeah.
Right? I'd say Yoko or the Beatles, maybe both. I mean,
I want to think both anyway.
Yeah, I want to think both too. Lennon was always my favorite Beatle, still is. I always loved that irreverence that he had, but I also loved that warm side of his material. He was very emotional with a lot of the stuff that he wrote, and that comes through in both his solo work and, of course, with his with the stuff that he wrote with the Beatles. But this just, I don't know, this clicks. And you made a good point about McCartney being very respectful, because he could have filled this thing with strings and really built it up, but he didn't.
Well, his hands all over the song.
Oh yeah,
playing the bass. He does that incredible impersonation of George Harrison doing the slide guitar, and I'm sure he had a major hand in doing the strings. But other than, you can hear him faintly in the background vocals and all of that. He doesn't insert himself into the song in a disrespectful way.
No, he didn't make it a Paul McCartney solo record.
Right.
Or a John Lennon solo record. Yeah. He made it a Beatles record, which is very difficult. But the Beatles, that's another thing. You were talking about AI. But the Beatles were one of the first groups to really grab a hold of changes in technology and just go full steam ahead with that. I mean, they stopped touring in 1966 and basically went into the studio.
Yeah.
Did a lot of their work most of their work at the EMI studios, now Abbey Road. But because Abbey Road only had a 4-track machine and Trident had a 8-track, they went and did a lot of work at Trident Studios, including Hey Jude. So it was a band that was always at the forefront of new technology. So it is fitting that the technology that Jackson and his staff have come up with, that the Beatles would embrace it and make something old brand new. Well, I read somewhere there are snippets of 2 or 3 songs. I couldn't detect where they were. I haven't had the opportunity to actually get the single and play it on my stereo. I had to listen to it on Spotify. But whatever they did add in that respect, it just makes the song even better.
I guess some of the background vocals came from earlier Beatles recordings. There was apparently a snippet from Because, that great vocal performance they do on Abbey Road.
And I think Here, There, and Everywhere, too.
I'm not sure. But I think they just did a fantastic job of, unlike the songs that they put out in 1995-96, Free as a Bird, and what was the other one? Real Love?
Real Love.
Which had a little too heavy a hand from
Jeff Lynne.
Jeff
from
Lynne,
ELO.
of
Yeah,
ELO.
they had Jeff Lynne's stamp all over them.
They were good songs, and I
yeah.
like them, but this sounds like the Beatles to me.
Yeah, this sounds like the Beatles.
More than
to me.
those songs did.
Oh yeah, me too as well. And I was kind of expecting something like Free as a Bird or Real Love, and I'm really happy to say that no, it's not like that at all. But I don't know. I think it's a great song. I mean, the single, as I said, I don't have a copy of it yet. It's very interesting that they've got Now and Then on the A side, and then you flip it over and you've got Love Me Do, which is the first single that the Beatles put out. I think that's a nice touch.
Yep.
And I guess they've remastered it, remixed it, or whatever. I listened to that as well, but it didn't sound any different to me. But as I told a friend of mine the other day, I'm not a huge fan of the song anyway, but I think it's a nice gesture to do that.
Kind of the first and the last.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other thing.
Yeah, you mentioned this the other night.
I keep hearing last and reading last, but if you watch the documentary, just as it's wrapping up, Paul McCartney says something about, and I'm paraphrasing, probably the last Beatles song. Now, maybe I'm reading something into that I shouldn't be reading into it, but is there other material out there?
They're going to start rumors, John.
Well, there you go. That's what we're good at. But anyway, that's the thing one of the things that I noticed in the documentary, which I thought was brilliant as well. He said, probably.
Okay.
And, McCartney, I've seen lots of interviews with McCartney over the years, and he can sometimes be a little cheeky.
Oh, yeah.
He likes to do that. So maybe he just said that without thinking. I really don't know. But anyway, both of us really like Now and Then, the new song by the Beatles. It seems so weird to say the new song by the Beatles, right? But no, there it is. We're going to be back in a week or so, and we're going to talk about the Beatles again, but we're going to talk about the Rolling Stones too. Now, think of this for a second. Two of the most popular bands in the world right now are the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Now,
at least with us, anyway.
Well,
I don't know about anybody
well,
else.
Hackney Diamonds is huge around the world. I know Now and Then is going to be huge as well.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that these two bands are still as big as they are? We're going to have some thoughts on that in a few days on this Sonic Obsession.